If only they would hear that. They'd listen a little more. I'm so honored by that introduction. It's way overly generous.
It's all true.
It's overly generous, and to imagine that Joel Fleischman would say those incredible things about our work is really, really humbling. So he is one of the most important mentors in my life. I feel very, very lucky that I had the privilege of meeting him through some friends early in my time at Goldman Sachs. And it isn't as if you're meeting someone who's a leader in this space. You're lucky enough to meet the leader in our country in the most effective kind of corporate individual and corporate philanthropy. And I told his class earlier today, and Ed heard this, that I hope you all know how lucky you are to work with him, to be students of his, because he sticks with you. I mean, he is the person that will always help you in your career, and the long list of much more impressive people than I, like Deputy Mayor Bob Steele, who was a longtime Goldman Sachs, a very senior executive, is another one of his mentees. But I'm trying to catch up as fast as I can. I really am. So thank you, Joel, and thank you so much, Ed and Greg. I spoke to a group earlier with Greg and with Ed, and I wish I had had the chance to come here to go to school. I mean, there's a treasure of knowledge and just real dedication by all of the leaders here and all of
we could help you with this matter.
Okay. Hey, listen, the weather today is making me think I'm going to come. I don't think that's really indicative. But anyway, thank you all so much for taking time to come. I know you're very, very busy. I want to say hi to Julia Levy, whose dad just emailed me. One of my close colleagues at Goldman Sachs said, my daughter is coming to hear you. So Julia, thank you for being here. Your dad's a huge supporter of our efforts, and I'm delighted to work with him. Maybe what I would do today is share a little bit about the work that we do at Goldman Sachs and what we hope we're trying to achieve in terms of excellence in corporate philanthropy and lessons we've learned and mistakes we've made, and really I'd most like to engage you in a dialogue. And in both of the previous sessions I've done today, I've learned so much because so many of you are really on the forefront and the front lines of all kinds of different important work in global development and domestic nonprofit work and business. So I'm really excited to have a chance to do that. So Joel outdid himself with that introduction. I'll just say that it's amazing to think that all of you are about to embark on new chapters. I mean, many of you have already had extraordinary experiences, but new chapters. And just a couple of lessons along the way maybe that I learned that I'll start with, which was Joel and Greg heard this a couple times, but I was born in Egypt. My family immigrated to the United States. A couple of funny stories that have turned into good lessons. One is that my parents used to always tell me and my sisters, Dina, Dahlia, and Denise. Yes, that's really our names. We left our homeland so that you all could reach your potential and pursue your dreams. And as long as you're anything you want to be, as long as you're a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. So that was sort of a big thing we heard growing up. And so when I did dutifully get into law school, but at the last minute before I went, I had a chance to go to Washington, D.C. to work for a senator. And, that was such a tough decision because I was all set to go to law school. I think I paid for the first semester. But I knew that this would be a unique opportunity. Something told me, partly because I worked full-time through college in the state senate, and I saw the impact that young people had in public policy. There are a few institutions or sectors that really give you a chance at a young age to feel like you're making a difference or you're part of something bigger, and certainly government at all levels is like that. And so I remember faxing my dad the letter that said, yes, I could defer for a year, which he waves around occasionally to remind me that, 16 plus years later, I never went back. But I did have a really interesting ride in government, as Joel so eloquently described. And I think that it taught me, now having been in the private sector for 5 years, but also working in the nonprofit space, if you will, that as you all think about your careers, you definitely do want to think about not over-planning, being open to the opportunities that come your way, but also thinking about what I now really believe are the 3 legs of the stool in terms of any career you're going to have, the public, the private, and the nonprofit sectors. They're all increasingly working together and interdependent. And I think that experience in each of those sectors ultimately make you the most prepared for anything that you're going to work in. Because nowadays, if you work in the private sector, government is, you're going to have to really think about what government's doing and how you interact. And of course, the nonprofit sector is working so closely with the private and public sector as well. The other lesson, I think, along the way, and I just always feel a need to say this, is not being overly stressed about where you start in an organization, because so many of us work hard, we go to school, we're paying off these loans, we feel like we need to have a certain level and a certain, job and a certain portfolio. But the truth is, I've really learned along the way that going for what you really, the institution where you want to work and having a whole lot of passion for that, and then really making your mark by kind of basic things I think people tend to forget now, which is having a really good attitude. I mean, it seems so basic, but I remember when I had worked full-time in the state senate, and I'd done it to pay for school, and I, by the fourth year, I'd really gotten some decent legislative experience and was involved in, the bills that the senator I worked for was responsible for. And I had the chance to work for Senator Hutchison, but then a job came open in the majority leader's office, and I remember it was definitely a step down. I mean, even though the position, the office was higher, but it really honestly was to, get coffee and fax and answer the phone. And it was a tough decision, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to go for it, and hopefully they'll recognize that I have other talents. And I did that for a year and was about to give up thinking that anybody even knew my name when suddenly a woman who I admired greatly ended up getting a promotion, and the chief of staff in the office came to me. And it really did blow me away, because Joel was way too gracious in saying I moved quickly. But I do remember that being a point where I couldn't believe they were offering me this job, which was a couple levels above. And he said, the truth is, you come in before everybody, you stay late, you have not such a fun job, but you do it with just a positive attitude. And so really don't underestimate that in any position that you go into, what a difference that makes. And I certainly saw that in the government a lot, because there are so many opportunities to show that as a differentiating characteristic. Almost 5 years ago, I got a call from Goldman Sachs. I should probably back up a teeny bit and tell you about what I did in the State Department, because it was very relevant. When I worked for Secretary Rice, it was after 9/11. I had the portfolio of the public diplomacy portfolio, which was the old U.S. Information Agency, Radio Free Europe. This, for many years had successfully battled against communism. And what was really scary, I think, in the time before 9/11 is that both Democrats and Republicans alike had said, oh, well, the battle for minds and hearts has been won. We don't need as robust, a platform to communicate with the rest of the world and to communicate our values. Well, they definitely, sounded a different note on September 12th, 2001, because we faced an entirely new battle for minds and hearts, and an entirely new communication challenge with, groups of people that didn't just, not like our ideals. They actually wanted to harm us. They wanted to kill Americans and kill themselves as a result of that. And I think that's kind of a big lesson that was overly analyzed by the 9/11 Commission, but it really was something that made our government say, what are we going to do now? And in the process of that, we began to look at all kinds of programs to expand our exchange programs, obviously, to bring more people from around the world here. The best thing that you can do, I think, is to expose individuals from around the world to American values by having them come study here or go on an exchange program. And we hear about that all the time. In fact, I'll tell you a very quick story, and I don't mean to digress too much in public diplomacy, but an interesting story. So one I used in my confirmation hearing. So during President Johnson's tenure, there was a very famous man, Charlie Wick, who ran USIA. And you may know this story, Ed. He was a friend of the president's, and he was a very successful communications lawyer, an FCC lawyer in New York. And one day he gets a call from President Johnson, and the president says to him, hey, Charlie, congratulations, I'm about to name you as head of USIA. And Charlie said, oh, wow, well, Mr. President, what an honor. I just have two problems with that. first of all, what the heck does that stand for? And why'd you pick me? And he said, well, it's U.S. Information Agency, and I picked you because I want a very close friend of mine who understands communications to be in this critical role at this critical time. And so Charlie said, well, I'm really, really flattered. And in his head, he's thinking, no chance am I moving to D.C. to do this. So he's saying, oh, I'm so flattered. Let me talk to my wife and get back to you. And the president said, sure, take all the time you need. Hung up the phone, walked out to the Rose Garden, and announced that Charlie Wick had just been named head of USIA. And so Charlie started on the job without much experience and an angry wife. You would never do that, Ed, right? Interestingly, the challenge at the time, it was increasingly the Middle East and what was going on. And so Charlie, innocently, not knowing how the government worked, said to the team at USIA, well, why don't we have exchange programs with, Egypt, for instance? It's kind of a big country. And they said, oh, we don't really have good diplomatic relations, and so we can't do that. And he said, oh, okay, well, I already told the president that we have an exchange program coming from Egypt, a group of people, so you better come up with some people. And so they scrambled around. This is why it's helpful when you have a friend of the president. And so they scrambled around, and the way exchange programs work, especially these short-term exchange programs called international visitors programs, is they bring people from different sectors. So you might have somebody in business and the government and media, all for a 3-week program to travel the country. And they offered 15 Egyptians this chance, and one happened to be a very senior government leader. And they came, they all had translators, and they went around the country, and the only requirement was that after 3 weeks in the United States that they come back and report to Charlie how the trip went. Well, he went to pick them up at the airport when they came back to D.C. and really surprised them by taking them to the Oval Office, where President Johnson spent some time with them. And at the end of that, the head of the delegation, the sort of equivalent of the Senate Majority Leader at the time in Egypt, came up to him. And he said, Mr. Wick, I have to tell you the truth. I didn't want to come on this program. I was actually scared because I heard so many negative things about Americans. Look at me, I'm a dark-skinned Arab man. I was actually scared to come to your country. But I realize now, after being here for 3 weeks, that all that you all promote about equality and diversity and respecting other religion, it's actually true. And when I return to Egypt, I will make sure my fellow citizens know that. And Charlie looked at him and said, well, Mr. Sadat, it is so wonderful that you could join us. That was Anwar Sadat's first trip to the United States. He returned, and it was in the midst of the time when Egypt was really forging one of two paths, getting much more close to the Soviet Union, or with Nasser's relationship with the Soviet Union, or out of the blue, beginning to think about should there be a relationship with the United States. And most historians actually believe that it was that trip that formed a very new way of thinking for Anwar Sadat that ultimately led to the first peace deal with an Arab country in Israel. So you think about those kinds of programs and the impact that they have, and those were, that was what I had the privilege of working on at the State Department. But what we realized after 9/11 is that we had to be more creative and find new leaders in these countries and unconventional leaders. And what we realized were very quickly was that women were such an important group. Women of all kinds, business women, leaders in the community, religious leaders in some parts of Southeast Asia that happened to be women. And so we began to increase our investments in exchange programs focused on women. And it really came at the time when there was so much data available, increasingly, about how when you educate a woman or you empower a woman, the unbelievable impact on society is felt rather quickly and meaningfully. So when a girl has 5 years of primary school education, when a mother has 5 years of primary school education, her children are 40% less likely to contract HIV/AIDS. When women are economically independent, they reinvest 90% of their income is reinvested directly into their communities through, girls' education, health centers, community awareness programs, etc. Not to pick on the men, but what do you think men spend their money on? Now you know the answer, right? What do you think men? And this, by the way, and I'm going to come around to the fact that even in the last 5 years, we see a change in the way men around the world are realizing, I need to be more supportive of empowering women. And so we're hoping this is trending positively. But when Nick Kristof, in his book Half the Sky, did the analysis. And if you haven't read that book, I think it's a must read. But what do you think he found that men spent their proceeds on? Any guesses?
Gambling, liquor, and prostitutes.
Very good. Gambling it was a part, but prostitutes, alcohol, and interestingly, tobacco and soda. But anyway, and soft drinks. Yeah, soft drinks. And think about that, right? So the leverage on an economically independent woman and what she spends her money on, and the ripple effect, and men. Again, no offense. So that kind of data was emerging, and what had happened at Goldman Sachs was that two of our smartest economists had independently written two pieces of research, one titled Womenomics and one titled Women Hold Up Half the Sky, both of which found that greater labor force participation by women in developed and developing economies led directly to greater GDP growth. In some ways it's an obvious, right? If half of society is more productive, you're likely to have growth. But on the other hand, there was a very specific segment, a segment of female entrepreneurs, small and medium-sized enterprise owners, that if they could get to the next level and create that many more jobs, the benefit to GDP growth was enormous, and then obviously to society. And so he gives me too much credit because Goldman Sachs had already determined that women's empowerment was going to be a priority and a strategic area of focus. And then our team had the privilege of figuring out, so what's the it, right? So we looked at the fact that there had been a lot of great work done in the microfinance space, which had been transformative for so many women around the world. But a complete white space existed above that, which was the small and medium-sized enterprise, the missing middle, as it's called. And that, again, those are the women that have a few employees, a great business idea, but are never going to have access to business education or capital or mentors and networks to scale those businesses. And so after a year of research, we always do a lot of research at Goldman Sachs, we realized that there was a real opportunity to partner with business schools and universities around the world to deliver a high-quality, pragmatic business education, link it with mentors and networks for these small business owners, and provide links to capital as well. I'm very excited to tell you that in the fourth year of 10,000 Women, we will reach the 7,000th woman by the end of this year. We track the results of these women from 42 countries extremely rigorously, and we have found that 80% of the women have increased revenues, 66% have created new jobs, 9 out of 10 of the graduates of 10,000 Women mentor another woman, at least one other woman. And of course, the other benefits that we're seeing is that the universities and business schools that we're working with that are wonderful institutions, right? They're the Dukes of China or Brazil or Nigeria, are also realizing, wow, we have an opportunity to serve a different segment of our society in a very practical way when the whole world is facing a global recession, and the path to job creation and growth are these entrepreneurs. And if they happen to be women in the developing economy space, then the benefit is just so enormous.
You might also say one of the most distinctive things about this in terms of corporate philanthropy is the degree to which they're focusing on serious evaluation.
Yes.
You might just say a word about that, because
Sure.
That's very rare.
Well, again, Julia can tell you that at Goldman Sachs they measure everything, and they don't treat our division differently, than the investment banking or the securities division in terms of, oh, well, that's the soft side, so you don't have to do business planning or evaluation, or, we're treated exactly the same, and that's very good for philanthropy. It's very good. It's a market force in a sense. And so we have the privilege of working with the Bridgespan Group, and some of you may know Tom Tierney, and they are extraordinary, and Greg Dees is on the board of Bridgespan, and they have been working with us. We have the really distinct honor of being the only corporation that Bridgespan has ever worked for. I think Greg, I hope, voted yes for that when it went to the board. I hope you did, because they had really been formed by Tom and Jeff Braddock, and Bridgespan exists because Joel Fleishman gave them their original
People I
grant.
work for.
And, well, I like to say you, because it's anonymous, but it's Joel, and actually started Bridgespan. Tom Tierney says to this day there wouldn't be a Bridgespan without Joel Fleischman. And what's really amazing is that, the reason they didn't want to work with corporations, understandably, is that traditionally corporations were, philanthropy was a nice thing to do. You might buy some tables at galas, and, maybe you might even make a big grant to something and put your corporation's name on the building. But, as Tom likes to say, that Bridgespan is in the business of steak, not sizzle. How do you really make effective philanthropy happen and results-driven philanthropy through, helping nonprofits think about their mission and what they're trying to achieve and how to measure that. And they hadn't done it for a corporation before. So it was a long, have you ever had the experience where you're trying to hire a consultant and you have to beg them to do it? So we had that experience, and all of our bosses really told Tom, no, we're really serious about this, and we really do want results. And so they actually set up a metric system for us, where we actually had an individual in each of the countries where we worked as part of the grant, tracking the business owners, validating the results, and being able to say, this is triple, quadruple, yes, this many jobs, this much revenue growth. And that's been, obviously, the reason I think we've refined the program in real time, because we're getting data and we can compare it across the board in terms of the different programs and make the adjustments that are needed. But also, I think maybe we didn't think about this honestly, Joel, at first, that we're also becoming a model for, I hope, how you measure effectively. And we've been really focused on that. So I think it's a good time, actually, to maybe introduce you to some of the 10,000 women scholars through a short video, which is sort of 3 very short case studies of women that have gone through the program. And then I'll tell you about our other program, or take some questions and then tell you about our other program. So we can roll the tape, as they say. Thank you. No, thank you.
Right now. We are a manufacturer of self-adhesive labels and barcode labels and hot stamping labels. The Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women Initiative has helped me develop my business, but really taught these great negotiation skills after the program. I made changes in the production processes. I installed new machinery, and I started making new kind of labels. I see things in the broader sense, and in this male-dominated industry, I was amongst the first ones to employ women. Now, I provide paid maternity leave. This was a mission for me, to pay it back to my society.
I am Christine, and I run a cosmetology school. We teach the girls how to braid, we teach them how to weave and how to relax hair. Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women program taught me how to keep my books, to have a bank account for my business. Liberia is a country that has been badly affected by civil war. After the war, I just returned home so I could be useful to my country. Women tell me I don't have the money to pay for school. So I say I train you for free. Within a year's time, I've helped undergraduate girls.
The Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women Project is training young women. They're going to be the beginnings of the growth of our private sector.
As they say, when you educate a girl, you educate a nation. That's how our country is going to be built. kicking outfit, known as No Leftovers in Nigeria.
Apart from the practical skills I have with cooking, I needed business skills.
With the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women Initiative, I was able to learn how to delegate. I was able to transition from my kitchen in my home to having my own accommodation. I've also learned that there's a need to network.
I speak with some business language. I never knew what benchmarking was all about. I never knew what strategy was all about, you know? But now, hey, check me out.
When a woman is empowered, the truth is she doesn't think of herself first. She thinks of the person next door. She thinks of her family. She puts everybody before herself. And you can imagine if everybody has that mindset, you can just imagine what the world would be like.
That gives you a better sense than I think I could about who these extraordinary women are. And it makes me, extremely proud of our firm, not just for the leadership it took and the dedication of, the CEO and the president and our board and our management committee, but of so many people at the firm who are so involved in the program. And I think that's a big piece of the why we did this. There were a whole range of reasons, but a really big piece is that our CEO always talks about that recruiting and retaining the very best people is the most important thing. That our product, our edge, do you have the very best people? And people want to work for an institution that's using its resources to make impacts like these. But so Goldman Sachs people have mentored. In fact, everybody in that video has a Goldman Sachs mentor. They review business plans. They serve on selection committees. They attend graduations. We have a waiting list of people that want to be involved. And it's really, really a big piece of the program and very exciting. Maybe I ought to pause for a minute. What do you think? And take some questions, or do you want me to say a few words about 10,000 small businesses?
10,000.
Okay.
10,000 small businesses.
So when we started 10,000 Women, we always knew we wanted a U.S. version of the program. Mind you, both of these were started in 2007, so before the downturn. And we always knew that. We had our foundation, since John Whitehead began chairing it many years ago, had, I think, 90% of the grants had been in the United States. And so the reason why the global initiative was that 51% of Goldman Sachs people now live outside the United States. It's a big global institution. And because, this was a little bit of a thoughtful, we hoped, response to the issues of globalization, and how we could help more people reach their potential globally. But we knew we wanted a U.S. program, and Dr. Ruth Simmons, you all know, is the president of Brown, was on our board at the time, enormously supportive of this initiative. She chairs the 10,000 Women Advisory Council now. And she was really someone who said, let's see if this model works in the United States. And so we launched an initiative 18 months ago called 10,000 Small Businesses. It's an effort to reach that number of small business owners here in the United States. It's men and women, small business owners. It's the same kind of segment, if you will, which are small business owners who have been operating for at least 2 years, have 4 full-time employees, are poised for growth. There's real growth potential for more job creation and revenue growth. And because we're working in this country through community colleges, it's very much based in urban and, in some cases, minority communities. Not just because that was an opportunity, but that's where the job creation and growth potential really is, because those are communities with extraordinary businesses and business leaders, but not necessarily access to the kinds of education and capital that in traditional form. So we're in 6 cities to date. New York, Los Angeles, Long Beach, Chicago, Houston, New Orleans, and we're about to announce Cleveland. Very exciting initial results. We have an advisory council led by Warren Buffett, Lloyd Blankfein, and Michael Porter. Dr. Porter, who said to us when we started, it's very likely that, you'll have about a 25% attrition rate just because very busy people. Ours is a very rigorous program. 10 Saturdays, every other Saturday, modules, on accounting, finance, growth, business capital, negotiations, legal clinics, HR clinics. You cannot graduate unless you attend all of them, and you cannot graduate without a growth business plan, a completed business plan that's been reviewed by somebody at Goldman Sachs. And so it's pretty shocking so far to us that we've had a 100% graduation rate, near 100%, and that the results are similar. Bridgespan is also tracking these results, and we're seeing very similar numbers in terms of job creation and growth. And really exciting, we were in Chicago last week with Mayor Rahm Emanuel, who insisted that the program come to Chicago, and even before he'd been inaugurated. And it was really interesting to see how the diversity of the businesses. There was a pet grooming spa and a bakery that had been in the family for 50 years called a Slice of Heaven, and, just real America. And it made you so much more optimistic than what you read about all the time, that small business owners in our country are totally motivated, totally passionate, excited about playing their very important part in this economy and knowing that they're responsible in many ways, right? It's not the big corporates where all the jobs are going to come from. It's these big, wonderful small businesses across our country. And there's not complaining going on. It's, thank you for this opportunity. I went to the negotiations module, and I didn't know that I was underselling my product and that I could totally renegotiate this contract. Or I went to the legal clinic and realized that I, have a better advantage, that I should be telling people, or learning how to incentivize my employees to get receivables, or, really tangible, practical ways to help their businesses. I actually do have a short clip if you're interested on the small business program. Okay. Thank you. And yeah, instead of a citywide. Yeah. Ohio might doing a couple of sites. Fair enough.
Job growth in the United States at this time is both a problem, but it's also an opportunity. We understand that small business is very often the engine of growing jobs.
I think most small business owners have no idea that they are what really drives the U.S. economy.
When you get people with ideas and energy, maybe some people helping them along the line, just think of what can be achieved.
The concept here is that we would develop a model where small business people can be taught the skills to develop their plans, to pursue capital, to test their ideas. This program pulls these elements together in a relatively short period of time to really turbocharge the growth of a small business.
You want to catch a big fry in your fish? Well, let me get you one. Okay, go ahead. One thing about this business that I really love is the generations of families that we've fed over the years. We started this business when I was in the 10th grade. I was 15. After I lost my dad in 2001, I just committed my life to it. As a small business owner, I kind of feel like you're on an island by yourself. And so when I saw the opportunity to participate with this 10,000 small businesses, I was like, oh my God.
Good evening, my name is Georgette Powell. I'm here from Mel's Fish.
After our orientation, I was in tears because I finally felt like I was in the room with people who knew what they were doing and were serious about it.
People's lives have been transformed, and their businesses have been transformed.
The business originated in 1922. Some of our employees have been here over 25 years, and we'd like to be able to grow the business so that we can offer jobs to more New Yorkers. When you're a small business owner, you're so hands-on and you get so bogged down with just staying alive sometimes as a business, you don't always step back and strategize. Having Goldman Sachs kind of educate me and advise me has been a very positive thing at a very stressful time. Year to date, sales are up 20%. Now, all of a sudden, people find something for in New York City, they know us. It's like, oh, Rosalie, of course I brought my blankets there.
Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses is really designed with the particular profile of the small business owner in mind.
I came to New York 9 years ago, and I started actually Manhattan Home Design with an idea of selling some stuff online. I remember actually it was a $500 startup capital. When you operate your business, you are actually multitasking, doing lots of the things on your own. And I think that's one of the main challenges, really identifying what are the areas that you are doing best and delegating, the areas that somebody else should be doing. One of the main assets that I got from the program was actually the networking part, the human connections that we make. Having help from a mentor from Goldman Sachs, we were able to close a $200,000 contract with the city of New York. It was my first large contract. It's really a nice feeling to be able to go to Times Square and sit down on one of my chairs.
Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses gives people the opportunity to get over that initial hump, prove themselves, create a reputation, or get the knowledge to survive and thrive. I think it's wonderful that Goldman Sachs is doing this because small businesses are what ties together neighborhoods. It is a very big part of society.
And 10,000 small businesses rise on that river of this is who America is.
Our guiding principle in this country is equality of opportunity. 10,000 small businesses is a big part of that.
I never feel better about the prospects of the United States and the strength of our people and our culture than when I come out of a meeting where I hear a small business person describe her business opportunity, her commitment. And when you see that, you begin to be very, very secure that the American dream is secure for another generation.
This program gave me the motivation to just want to fight again.
Is there any size limit? You said a minimum of 4 employees. Is there a maximum too? Or
the revenues.
Revenue?
But we've been very flexible. I mean, there are some businesses. So the revenue range is $150,000 to $4 million annually. But we've been flexible because there have been some that have fallen just shy of that, and they're about to get there. And then some that are much larger in terms of revenue generation, but they have the potential to create 100 jobs. So you want to, or 200 jobs or more. I mean, they're bigger businesses.
Right. So the floor is open to questions or comments at this point. Very interesting examples. And of course, all the while that they're running these 2 programs, they're all also doing the foundation, Goldman Sachs Foundation is doing other things as well. And you want to say a word about the range of things there that the foundation is doing?
Well, we have 2 entities that encompass our global corporate engagement. One is the foundation, which runs these programs, and which is kind of the corporate side, if you will. That's what the corporation invests in. And then our individual giving platform is Goldman Sachs Gives. It's a donor-advised fund where a portion of every partner's compensation is put into it, and partners have the right to recommend to charities of their choice grants. We have some restrictions for very purposeful reasons. One is that we have pillars that we hope partners will look at. Education, honoring veterans in service, strengthening communities, and job creation and growth programs. We also, and it's something we learned from Joel and Tom in their fabulous book, Give Smart, that all of you should read, of course, which is that especially in these difficult times, the large institutions are, obviously getting a larger share of the pie. They have the fundraising networks, they have the alumni that go on to be very successful. So universities, the symphony, the cultural organizations, very worthy, by the way. But when more than 60% of all of philanthropy in our country are going to those entities, and the smaller, organizations, the charter schools, the soup kitchens, the foster care nonprofits that don't have those kinds of, fundraising capabilities are missing out and yet are desperately in need of more funds. So we encourage partners to do a couple things to diversify their giving and help us. We're happy to help them find nonprofits that are interesting to them. But also, if you want to give to Duke, we're totally for it. But do you really need another, Fleischman Institute? Maybe we do. But we do, I think. But I mean, instead of another giant building or center, how about financial aid? And so because of that focus, which universities are pleased to still get those kinds of dollars, of course, we've been able to contribute $45 million in the last couple of years to students that wouldn't otherwise have been able to attend universities of their choice. And so there are some of those kind of coaxing and nice or friendly restrictions, I guess we could say, and partners have been very responsive. And I would like a Fleischman Center, don't get me wrong.
No need for it. So the questions from anybody at this point, or comments? Ted?
Yeah, I'd love to hear on the 10,000 women, how did you arrive at the concept and what was your sort of strategic thinking that went into picking that as your focus?
Sure. Well, clearly we realized that our differentiating assets were, in the whole women's space, if you will. There are many worthy things you could have invested in: girls' education, maternal mortality, working to combat violence against women and girls. So if you think about the life cycle of a girl and woman, obviously our differentiating space is driving economic growth. Something we know about is what our people understand and relationships that we have to build programs around. We then, as I said, did a mapping of what economic empowerment programs were out there for women globally. And most, 90% were really microfinance lending programs. And again, very worthy, very transformative, not successful equally in all places, but there was a lot of that going on. But what really, and that's not our space, that's we're not a lender in that way, a direct lender. But the space above, just really, how to generate, how to ignite those businesses that were in the video took a different kind of investment. We also, because we recruit from, the world's leading universities and business schools, had relationships where we could really go to them and say, what do you think about working together to build a curriculum and, give business and management education to a population you've never served before. So that was sort of the stages of thinking. And then we added things along the way based on the data. We began to partner with the World Bank and OPIC and the State Department on the capital piece, because there really is more capital available globally, but it's making that link between the likely recipient and the capital. And so there were many phases and many iterations, but I think that's what we realized was we had an opportunity to make an investment that hadn't been made before.
And where did the focus on women, which is underlying all of this, where did that
it was very organic. The economic team at Goldman, the economists, they're always looking for trends, right? It's Jim O'Neill coined that term BRICS, and they're always saying, oh, wait a minute, here's the next big trend. It's the emerging economies, or it's technology in this space, and they really had written pieces. They weren't philanthropic, pieces, and they weren't, commissioned. They saw a trend, and the trend was that when you invest in women, GDP grows. GDP grows in a number of ways, and more dramatically in emerging economies than developed.
I'm curious, because you had evaluation kind of in real time, can you talk about maybe where you had to make some changes along the way, where you maybe spotted some pitfalls, or how you kind of moved the ship while you were on the ship?
Well, I think we underestimated a lot of things. So for the macro sense, we underestimated the demand. We had people actually say to us, do you think you'll find 10,000 women around the world who are business owners? And, now we have a 14% acceptance rate, so it's harder to get into 10,000 women than to Duke, I think. And so the demand was enormously high. The demand on the part of business schools and universities to do programming like this was higher than we expected. I mean, it's why we have 80 academic and nonprofit partners. And then in terms of the programmatic elements, many things emerged, big, small, medium, and large. The negotiations class has been the most popular class in every program globally. Negotiations and accounting. And now Warren Buffett had warned us to double up on accounting, here in the United States. But globally, we had a full module, but we really needed 3, and so things like that, we really needed more, because if you think about it, negotiations, everybody ought to learn how to negotiate better, but particularly for women in emerging economies, just how important that is to really many facets of their business was a big learning. Bigger things like how important the business advising and the one-on-one mentoring was something that we definitely, made a double investment in and spent more money in the grants to get that one-on-one advising. And then I would say the other really big thing we underestimated was the power of the network. So the women coming together in these cohorts and not just becoming friends and networks. I mean, remember, the guys are all at the bar with the prostitute, the cigarette, and the soda. So, they've got some networking opportunities. They're not nice networking opportunities, but they're doing it. Women in these economies were not having access to hooking up with each other and sharing ideas and problems and challenges. They were islands, into themselves, trying to raise their families and build these businesses. So that was, so the camaraderie, but then the marketplace, just the actual marketplace it created. So women now saying, well, why would I ever use another catering company but IO's? Why would I ever get my hair done anywhere but Christine's, now? Why would I not, work with Divya, on packaging and relabeling? Like Divya basically redid all of the packaging for the consumer products companies, the companies that actually had products. There's a web designer, actually in Zambia, that redid everybody's website. So it also just literally became a wonderful marketplace. And that's something that we realized we needed to nurture more. And so that's why we've now really invested in the alumni piece of the program.
Tim, do you?
Sure. Thanks. Now, this question has been asked of other people sitting in your seat, and it made some of them squirm. And so I'm going to ask you to take a risk and answer something that I think will actually help a lot of the folks around this table. And that is, you, in any given year, have a set of objectives, I'm sure, that the firm hands you. But my guess is there are objectives that you've handed yourself. The vision that you have for what impact you would like to see your time have on Goldman Sachs. I'm speaking specifically for the firm, not for the 10,000 women. But is there something that in the sort of the morning when you wake up and your mind is free and you can imagine it would be really nice if the firm changed in this way, or I'll be remembered for this? What would those things be?
Mm-hmm. Well, what a thoughtful question.
Is this off the record or on the record?
Well, yeah, we can. I think she can handle it on the record, but.
No, I would say, it's been a very challenging few years for the private sector generally, and certainly Wall Street, right? It's a lot of very important questions are being raised about, the utility of institutions like ours. And I think we need to do a better job communicating. So kind of broadly, not just in the philanthropic space, but it's been very difficult. And I would say now, we just had the CEO roundtable with Secretary Panetta, because one of our big investments is veterans, wounded vets, through GS Gives, supporting wounded veterans when they return. And we had the CEO roundtable, and I was struck by the fact that many of the CEOs, not just the Wall Street CEOs, were talking about how it's such an important time to explain why the private sector is important in America. Why that differentiates our country. The free market principles really do differentiate our country, and anybody from anywhere can start a business and succeed and go as far as they can. And in my homeland in Egypt, they can't do that right now. So There's something about, more effectively, and it may be partnering with individuals to talk about what the private sector should be doing and is doing across the board. I think specifically at the firm, I would say that there's something that's been ignited. I mean, we always have had people that are so civically minded, and always, Bob Steele and John Whitehead and Hank Paulson, and civically minded in terms of public service, but also in massive philanthropic giving. So Goldman Sachs has fielded more individuals to serve on nonprofit boards than any other institution in history, public or private. We have a record of it. So
also fielded more and more of partners going into government than any other corporation in the country, which is really interesting. They received an award for partnership public service.
Oh, that's right.
I think it was 45 Goldman partners that served in cabinet or sub-cabinet levels of the federal government.
That's right.
Nobody is near second.
And so I would say it's not like these programs started and suddenly people at Goldman, that there's a long history. But I do think given the response recently by our junior, mid-level, and senior people, I think we need to think even bigger about how people can, do their day job and then be really involved in making a difference elsewhere. And I think, our bosses are open. They're open-minded. We have to come up with those ideas and increase them more dramatically, quickly.
Marty?
Let me follow up on that. In 2003, I interviewed about 35 to 40 managing directors for Goldman Sachs who were going through a program that the foundation was sponsoring in which they were competitively selected, and then they chose a nonprofit organization and were paired with an executive director to go through about 4.5 days of training around the nonprofit sector, specifically on the nonprofit sector, at an MBA school at Harvard. I was struck in interviewing those individuals that with the wealth of business experience, that by and large they had very little knowledge and very little understanding of the nonprofit sector. And most of them were at a point in their career where they were either going to go up in the management structure or they were going to bail out in 3 or 4 years with single to double-digit significant portfolios, and not really certain what they were going to do in the nonprofit sector. So I'm struck by your comment about the role of nonprofit boards in the company first. Secondly, I'm also interested in sort of lost contact. I think that program ran for at least 2 or 3 years after I left, but I was wondering if that program is still ongoing and whether there were any lessons that were learned from that program.
Great questions. Well, actually, you're kind of confirming what I'm saying, which is that it tends to be the partners of Goldman Sachs, not the managing directors, right? So most people at Goldman Sachs leave, graduate from Fuqua, go in as an associate and literally spend 10, 15, 20 years at Goldman Sachs in really tough jobs. Now they have employee engagement programs. They tend to certainly be generous, or philanthropic. But the tradition had been then they become a partner and then they have a little more time, or when they leave the firm, they get very, very active philanthropically. And that, has started to change. So I think because of programs like Goldman Sachs Gives, where we're helping young partners know more about philanthropy, they didn't traditionally have a background in it, but we actually have a board placement service now for managing directors and partners that didn't exist a few years ago. Because there's the desire, but it's a matchmaking. You have to find like you were saying, the partner and the organization, and the managing director in the organization.
These folks were being trained to go on the nonprofit board as board members, which is why they were going through the training with the executive director from their chosen nonprofit organization. But I was stunned by the lack of experience and knowledge about the sector, and the lack of opportunity in listening to them describe their lives. The lack of opportunity really to engage because of the culture and the work ethic at Goldman Sachs for the bulk of I guess, for most of their career.
Mm-hmm. Well, you said it was 2003. I would say, I mean, I've been there since 2007, and I think there's been a dramatic change over the last several years. I think that, first of all, I think that one thing Goldman's very obsessive about is the human capital management and sort of the how do we improve, creating more well-rounded individuals, because if they're more well-rounded, they're going to be more effective with clients, they're going to be, better business leaders. So there really has been a concerted effort. The program that you described, we have a I mean, it's, again, didn't exist in 2003, but an entity called Pine Street, which is kind of our executive MBA program within Goldman that does a series on nonprofit leadership, getting on a nonprofit board. It also has a bunch of other things like how you speak effectively in a presentation. So I do think there's been more of a concerted effort to ensure that there are more opportunities. Plus, now it's also like anything, if you measure it, it helps. And so now you see, I mean, there was always an ethos there, but now in the review system, there's actually, did you engage in philanthropic activity? And that always, right, makes a very big difference.
Dina, let me ask you maybe a sticky question, too. You start the two programs not long after you get there, and the market tanks and lots of bad press, etc. Did you have to confront, and if you did, how, lots of pushback and cynicism from outsiders saying, my God, Goldman Sachs needs them to do charity or something like that, and the genuine interest in the firm in doing these programs? Were there substantial communications, personal things to deal with, and how'd you do it?
Well, I think there was a couple of things that alleviated that a bit. One is that the program started in 2007, so before the crisis, before the financial crisis. So obviously that was helpful. Thank goodness, I like to say. The other piece is that if you think about these programs, they're really challenging, and there's high execution risk. A lot of things could have gone wrong with 10,000 women. A lot of things could, and still could, but you hope that now that nearly 7,000 are done, you get a pass on if a few things were messed up. But so it wasn't an easy path. So let's imagine that you said they did this just to get good PR, and there are a lot of easier ways to do it. So I think the firm realized that if you really want to, over the long term, show the kind of values you have to have results, and that's really hard, takes a long time, a lot of partners, really transparent, showing your results, et cetera, et cetera. And as a related piece to that, we're not in the video, you know what I mean? It's the 10,000 women speaking. I mean, it's the other thing is when you have people who can actually say, I went through this program, I had these results, that's the best kind of affirmation that you can have, and when they're in the thousands around the world, that becomes, I think, compelling. Internally, I was shocked that the firm didn't waver. I mean, I think there were times that I thought, wow, it's a lot of money, tough times, are they going to, scale it down a bit, or, and they just didn't. I think it's also a place when, I think that maybe part of that is because leadership has been so involved and invested, and it's a good lesson in corporate philanthropy, you have to make sure the leadership is really invested, that it was sustained. And they had also experienced it, many of them. Like, for instance, in March, the board of directors of Goldman Sachs is going to India once a year. They pick a market, and they have the board meeting there. And, we're taking them for a day to Delhi to meet Divya and that class of 10,000 women. That's, I think, unusual to have, senior leadership that involved in the corporate philanthropic piece.
Is that a question?
I did. My first comment was that I shared with Dana. I found that the report from Goldman Sachs, and I actually used it a lot to justify the programs that we were pushing to help women entrepreneurs get business as well as IT skills. And that's been around the developing country. So
thank you. It's a big honor.
Yeah, it's honors mine. Questions I have is related to the future of 10,000 women. It's you've already set the mark, 10,000 women, and you're about to get there.
Trouble with numbers.
So what? First question is what comes next, and second is the issue of empowering women has happened. I mean, sometimes it takes a center stage, sometimes it doesn't. looks like it's coming back with the World Bank with their flagship agenda, but we do see Goldman Sachs continuously investing in women.
Great questions. So the trouble with numbers is you reach them. You reach the goal. And so we're close.
If you don't have numbers, you don't reach them.
That's true. That's true. No, but actually, I think another, potential realization along the way was that this is working, and so what's the responsibility now to take what's, you could call it a really big pilot that's been incubated, and how do you dramatically scale it? We've learned a lot of things that are helping guide our decision about that. I mean, we definitely want to scale the program effectively. One thing we've learned is that because of the measurement system, co-investors have emerged. I mean, I think they're seeing the results and they want to say, maybe we'll work with you to scale the program. We had an interesting model of that was the Inter-American Development Bank, came to us and asked if we would consider a co-investment opportunity in Peru, where they really wanted a 10,000 women program because they were working with Mi Banco, which is actually a microfinance institution that was developing a new product, a new financial product for small and medium-sized enterprises. And as a result, IDB said, we'll pay for half, a real co-investment, and we'll give the women capital. And so it's one of our larger programs. 700 women will be trained in Peru, and the First Lady in Peru has been very active in the program. And 46% of the women have accessed capital when they graduate. That's a huge number in accessing capital, as you can imagine. So there are models like that where we might be able, we'd like to work with other entities to scale it. But I'd love your thoughts. I'm not kidding. If you guys have ideas and thoughts, we're thinking about using technology. We're thinking about larger numbers in certain countries, adding cohorts to the really effective universities. We have a very good group of people thinking about it, and we'll, we have to have a plan by the end of the year.
Well, you could, in fact, think about have Goldman Sachs challenge some other companies, or simply have them challenge, saying, we want partners in this effort. We'll match dollar for dollar what you all put up.
Yes, that's a good idea. Yeah, definitely. And Coca-Cola and Walmart and others have announced women's programs, and
I push on alumni, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Every city year, AmeriCorps, alumni cohorts are just on fire when you get them right, and can push us so much further, both Goldman Sachs alumni and alumni of the people who go through the program.
Right.
So each one teach one.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's a great idea.
You said at the beginning you the niche above the micro financing. Do you relate to them in any way? For example, are you in Bangladesh and do you work with Brock, or sort of build on their successes and take them to another level, or are you operating pretty much separately?
Well, the Mi Banco, I guess, example is the most relevant, where we didn't have women that could access their microfinance products, and so they said maybe we should go up a notch. And so even though they're a microfinance institution, they're now working with our women, which definitionally means they're working at a different level. We're working with Women's World Banking, which is a really wonderful organization led by Mary Ellen Iskandarian, which is kind of like the association of micro and middle lending intermediaries. And we're thinking with her about creating new products, not just at financial institutions, but even like in the United States, what's called a community development financial institution. These are non-profit. I'll tell you why, though. It's a good question. One of the reasons why we found that white space is that a big report had come out in the World Bank which showed that women who are micro lenders, and by the way, this is transforming, saving lives, right? That the $5 to get to buy the chicken or the cow or the, is now providing for the family. The woman can sell the milk, but that is such a different level. And what had not happened, and I think some people had theorized that now then maybe she would buy 5 more cows and have a cow farm and a cheese factory, and it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And so that's why that whole just coming in at a totally different level. Now, many of the women we work with in Rwanda hire those women and help those women in a different way, but that woman is not Io or Christine.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm really curious because I serve on a board of the North Carolina Center for Women in Public Service, where we recruit and train women across the state to seek elected and appointed positions. And so I'm curious if this empowerment of women in business, have you seen it translate to service in the public sector in these companies, or whatever the equivalent is, the government sector? Because if the 90% of the investment, or 90%, what was the stat?
90% of the proceeds or income is reinvested in the community.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Have you seen that translate to women seeking more
Public office?
Public office, or
it's interesting. Again, just because you all see these women, when Christine, the woman in Liberia, had never left Liberia. President Johnson Sirleaf called us and said she had a chance to nominate a couple people to go to CGI, the Clinton Global Initiative, and she picked Christine. Christine ended up going to the White House. Christine ended up, it was kind of a crazy, crazy trip. And she was amazing. Anyway, when she went home, you know how when Olympic stars go home, people flood the airport and streets? That happened. I mean, it really overwhelmed us. But think about it. I mean, how many people in Liberia go to the White House, And so Christine's become a media leader. I mean, she's on TV all the time, talking about the power of women entrepreneurs. She's a media darling, now. And so I can see that next phase of taking on more public roles. I see it in Io, the woman in Nigeria. She's now gotten a big contract to provide the school lunch in her province, in Lagos, and she's a very different woman than the woman I met when I was there 4 years ago, and you just can tell now the community is coming around her and asking her to take on more of a leadership role. So, I can't tell you, yes, someone's become a member of parliament that graduated from 10,000 women yet, but I think that I wouldn't be surprised if it happened.
Listen, thank you. Greg, sorry.
I just wanted to ask one last question and give me a chance to apologize for stepping out, so I will apologize.
Poor Greg's had to hear this 3 times today. I think he needed a
break.
break.
That's not why I said that. There's another reason. I'll fill you in later. But so if this was asked while I stepped out, I apologize for that too. So if you were to start this again now, what would you do differently? Is there anything you would do differently?
Sure. A lot of lessons learned. I think the big one, it's a good lesson, certainly for us. I think we just underestimated what would happen if it worked. So I don't think we did enough planning, to be honest with you, about scaling it if it worked. I mean, by the way, 10,000 is pretty good. and Tom Tierney always says to us, you know what, you set out a goal, and if that's all you do, you can't, that's what your donors allowed, if you will, and that's what you agreed to. But I think, it's really working, and it's working in a time when it's so critical to have women be part of the economic drivers of growth. So I would say that, and I would also say that we completely underestimated the second part of your question was, is this a tipping point moment in this cause? And I really think it is, and I think that we didn't realize we were going to be part of that. So when you have an investment bank, not the World Bank, not the UN, not an NGO, but an investment bank that stands up and always says, you should buy gold or not buy gold, or you should invest in oil or not. The fact that we were saying, it's women. Women are a great investment. We were such a different voice in the space that was obviously a kind of a more credible voice in that way, that if you invest in women, the economy grows and society prospers. So we underestimated that, and I think we would have more early on begun to think about what happens next. But, now we're doing it as fast as we can.
So now you have time to do that. Right?
Just one little follow-up, just because I'm curious. Is the funding working out basically the way you thought it would work out? That is the, whatever, $100 million dollars committed for 10,000 women. You're now 70% of the way there. Does it look like the $100 million is going to get you to 10,000? Or
oh, yeah. Trust me, that budget process was strictly reviewed. Not only is it getting us there, we're actually coming in under budget, and I think part of that is because so many other universities are wanting to work with us, and that number, by the way, is not just the 10,000 participants. Yeah. That's the leave behind. That's the capacity building at each of the universities, right? So that's the professors trained, locally relevant case studies written, the curriculum, the entrepreneurial centers being created. So that, it's both the sustainable long-term investment, the scholarships, all of it. So, yeah, we're very pleased.
That's terrific.
And the reason we're coming, and look, we'll find ways, I'm sure, to effectively, add on to the alumni or, things like that. But I think it's because the universities are doing more in kind than we thought.
Before I thank Dina and all of you all, let me just announce that there are two more speakers for the FIRG series this spring. On March the 23rd, Carolyn Marsh, who is the immediate past president and CEO of Atlantic Philanthropy, is speaking here. Except that will be back at the normal time, 4:30 in the afternoon. And then on April the 4th, Patty Harris, who's the president of the Bloomberg Foundation, will be also speaking that time. But I do want to thank Dina for coming today. She got up very early this morning to fly down here, and she's going to go back tonight. But all I can say is it was really, I heard you twice today, and I learned more this time in addition to what I learned this morning.
Thank you,
really, really wonderful.
Well,
you were
thank
just
you
too
all
kind
so
in your too generous in your comments about me, but nonetheless.
They're very true.
Thank you all very much.